This is a very important side event. As you know, the need-based finance is one of the regional activities which were mandated by the COP, but importantly, it's one activity which indeed identifies the needs of the regions in terms of climate finance. So the objective of this afternoon event is just to share progress and updates on where we are. We need also to use this opportunity to enhance collaboration, and we need, of course, to strengthen our capacity efforts in terms of identifying the needs in the various areas, and of course, promote transparency and accountability. So I thank you once again for joining us. I'm Richard Myungi. I'm from Tanzania. I'm the advisor to the President of Tanzania on climate change and environment. So I was privileged to have your colleagues here. But before we start our work, I want to give the floor to our host, Danielle, whom you know very well. Danielle Violet is the Senior Director, Program Coordination here at the Secretariat. So he's going to give the opening remarks, then we'll kickstart our business. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Richard. Good afternoon to all of you, and great to see the room full, and I guess also people online. So good afternoon to all of you. I'll keep really my introduction very short, but I think it's important moment to take stock of the needs-based finance project. I consider it on the side of Secretariat one of the flagship projects we have in the area of climate finance. Of course, it is done in response to a mandate from the COP, but the way it has evolved and really touching upon the needs at the national level on the basis of what countries determine on what is important for them and how they can come up with the list of potential projects for investments. And again, these plans, this has happened so fast, and it's quite remarkable. Now with around 100 countries being involved in these efforts, it's for us really a great satisfaction to have the opportunity to listen from the experience from the country directly, and at the same time look ahead on what else we can do in this space. One particular aspect that I want to touch upon is the fact that we are now collaborating with many partners, and in particular, I would like to refer to the work we are doing with the GCF, JEF, and Adaptation Fund in convening them together with the in joint workshops, and this is something that was quite an innovation, and we are very pleased that this is happening. So, apart from thanking this organization and for the great collaboration, it's also a demonstration that having these key actors, the financial mechanism of the Convention and Paris Agreement is critical in moving into the implementation on the ground and providing the resources where are most needed. So touching upon that and finishing off, I mean, I think the regional aspect on this provide the opportunity for not only having the key actors on the ground to come together, but also to identify specific regional barriers and specific regional opportunities, so that whatever is coming out in terms of potential list for investments in the specific country is really based from a bottom-up approach and responding directly to the needs of the country. So we do have a lot of partners as well that have been supporting the work of the Secretariat. I will thank them here in all together and also providing financial resources to the Secretariat for conducting this work. So I'll stop here. Thank you, Richard, again, and thank you all for being here with us today, and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you indeed for your opening remarks. I think you deserve the round of applause as we start. Thank you.
No need. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we go. Let me remind you that this is live streamed through the YouTube, but unfortunately we will not be able to interact with those who are listening to us or seeing us. We'll have to leave this place by 14:30, so we have limited time. Otherwise, let me introduce our panelists today. We have Sarah. Sarah is sitting on the far end. She is the head of adaptation section in the Directorate of Climate Change, the Ministry of Environment, the Kingdom of Jordan. So Sarah will be our first speaker, and she represents the Arab States region. We also have Mr. Michael Okumu. He's the Deputy Director, Climate Change Negotiations and Finance from Kenya under the Climate Change Directorate. Michael is there. Maybe you, yeah, they all know you. Thank you. Then we have Mr. Ro Koume, Program Officer, Climate Change and Climate Services. He's part of the ECOWAS Commission. He represents the West African region under the Directorate of Environment and Natural Resources. We do have from Asia, the Asia region, Zahim Habib is the head of the Brunei Climate Change Secretariat, Brunei Darussalam region. This is the Asian region here, no? Thank you. Darussalam actually sounds like Dar es Salaam. So we share some history. Then we have Tibian Ibrahim. He's the Assistant Director of Climate Change, Department of Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Republic of Maldives. He is representing also the island region. Thank you so much for being here. We will have the opportunity to hear from colleagues their experiences on the needs finance project from the regions, their countries, where they have been able to identify their needs. They have been able to assess the flows. They have been able to strategically strengthen their capacity mobilization, and they have been able to ensure the capacities are built also in the context of accessing the resources. Now, I will start with Sarah. You can give your experience, just not more than 5-8 minutes. Welcome, Sarah.
Hopefully. Thank you, and thanks, everyone. Please let me take this opportunity on behalf of Arab states to express our gratitude to UNFCCC Secretariat, League of Arab States, and ESCWA, who are helping provide support to the Arab states in regarding developing and implementing, hopefully, having this strategy, and hopefully to come up with a real implementing projects that will be a base for the future work regarding building our way forward, how to deal with our needs and how to transform those needs toward specific and bankable projects that would be implemented on the ground. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to an UNFCCC team who gave me the opportunity to present the Arab region states and our experience in the need-based finance. But please let me take the opportunity and rely a lot on my experience as a negotiator. To have your thoughts with me that until now we still haven't a clear agreed definition for the climate finance. But what comes to our mind that the local, national, and transnational financing that is drawn from private, public, and other alternative finance resources that seeks to implement mitigation and adaptation measures toward climate change. But the idea is that the countries whom are suffering a lot and have their responsibilities a little bit than other countries have to have more financial resources than other countries. So this is what comes to our mind, that the common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities for the principle of the convention. Upon that, and relying on the idea about, yes, we have to have a need-based finance because there is financial resources, and for Arab region, which is comprised of around 22 countries, 19 of them are water scarcity countries, where 13 of them fall below the absolute freshwater scarcity threshold, which is around 500 cubic meter. And for my country, Jordan, the percentage per capita per year, it's around 85 cubic meter. So from the perspective that there is a finance needs, there is vulnerabilities, there is a huge interest from our region that we need to work together regarding climate change. And from that, it comes the importance of having such a project, where it's the process of having the project started 2019, where the first kick-off workshop for the technical assessment for the strategy was held in conjunction with the Arab negotiator meeting at that time. Where the League of Arab States request the Secretariat and ESCWA to provide support for Arab country to have the technical assessment, and the work started where the technical assessment provide the flow of finance for the region, climate finance for the region, and express the needs for the region regarding climate change mitigation and adaptation, relying a lot on the national reports and nationally determined contribution from the region. After having the technical assessment, which is one of the most important input to build the strategy, which is the climate finance, mobilization and access strategy, where the Council of Arab Ministers of Environment request the Secretariat, UNFCCC Secretariat and the Technical Secretariat for the League of Arab States and ESCWA to start the work on building the strategy for Arab region. The strategy, and it's 2021, September 2021, where the strategy have its main aim is to facilitate the access to and mobilization of climate finance for the region, and increase for sure the region's capacities toward tackling climate finance, and hopefully we can increase the opportunities as a region to provide finance to implement our needs and priorities. So also the NDCs, the nationally determined contribution, are one of the main inputs to build the strategy, whereas Arab country, we see that the strategy is the base for the way forward, hopefully, to help us to articulate our needs and also link the needs with the suitable financing windows which is available, and to try our best to increase our own capacities to link the needs, with the sources, and with our country's expectation toward committed to our climate change convention. After having the technical assessment and the strategy is now in the drafting process, where the Council of Arab Ministers for Environment approved it, but there is a second round of iteration to collect the comment from the UNFCCC focal point in each country. This is the second round of iteration, and hopefully before COP28, the strategy will be approved, hopefully September or October, by the Council of Arab Ministerial for Environment. For us, through the experiencing this project, and why we see this project is important, and it was a must for the region, that through the project, and as the main objective of the project itself, which is highlighted in our strategy, that we need to enhance the access for climate finance, and we need to enhance the mobilization for climate finance. Also, we need to build our capacities regarding what type of suitable financial resources that we could have regarding the priority needs. And when we say priority needs, it's not something easy that we can have prioritize our needs, and even though to understand what's actual needs that we have. So having the process for doing all of this, it was being supported by this project. And when we say increasing our capacities, how is that? In September last year, we have a technical workshop where an expert from the region, we've been invited by the Secretariat to participate in a technical workshop. For us, it was the first of a kind workshop, because as Mr. Daniel mentioned, that GEF Adaptation Fund were jointly with us, and also around 9 accredited entities to those funds were with us in the workshop. It was a 3-day workshop where we worked together as a groups. For each group, we have a representative from one of those funds, one representative from accredited entities, and us as experts in Arab region needs regarding climate finance, to come up with project ideas that the Secretariat hopefully will help and provide support to the region to transform those project ideas to a bankable project that hopefully will be submitted to those funds, and to get the support. And the project ideas that been developed, it's a regional project ideas, and this is also one of the specialty point about this project, that it help increase the cooperation and coordination between the region, and increase the capacities toward understanding what other countries within the same region, do we share the same challenges, do we have the same expectation from UNFCCC Secretariat, from the funding source representative, and what we can do to decrease the challenges, and what we can do to help the region to better adapt to climate change and increase our resilience. So hopefully it's clear, and I'm happy to have the questions after my colleague will finish their intervention. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I didn't cut you off because you are the only lady here representing everyone here. So thank you indeed. And of course, you are the first speaker, so you take the lion's share. But the rest of the speakers, please stick to the 8 minutes. so that we can allow everybody to contribute in the discussions. So next is Michael. So can you please give us your experience and also touching on the challenges, on the how we can foster commitments and actions and the barriers, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator. I don't know, I had a presentation. Is it coming up? Okay. Yeah, so thank you for this opportunity to share our experiences and also learn from each other, and also kind of stir up others also to take up from the lessons that we are learning. So my name is Michael. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'm going to give a presentation on the East Africa community. East Africa community is a community of 7 partner states. Until very recently, we were 6, but recently we had a DRC joining EAC, and that doubled the size of the East Africa community because of the size of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And these 7 partner states in this particular program, the need-based finance project, we held 8 consultative workshops, and we also had 1 training. And in this workshop, we were able to assess our needs from the grassroots, what we call, and where I come from, it's called from the bottom up. So we had consultative workshops, and every country came up with their needs after internal processes within the country. And then we also had an opportunity to develop a climate finance strategy for the East Africa community. And this also was a very consultative process among the partner states. Then apart from that also, after the strategy was developed, it has to go through the processes of the East Africa community, and very similar to what my sister just shared there before. It had to seek the endorsement of the Sectoral Council of Ministers for it to be an East African strategy. And after endorsing this particular strategy, we had to come up with an implementation plan to enable us implement this strategy. And with the implementation plan, we developed what is called priority pipeline projects. We had several project ideas coming from the partner states. Then after the ideas, we gathered together to make them wide and accommodative so that we have broad areas that are able to cover most of the needs that cut across countries. Then after that, we had now to come up with a way of kind of building the capacity of the experts to be able to access finance. So we had a climate finance access training. Next slide, please. Yeah, so after doing grouping the project ideas together, we came up with a total of 6 pipeline projects, or priority pipeline projects, broad enough to cover everybody, but also without diluting the purpose of the project. So we had an area on ecosystem services, an area on food security, an area on water security. Then we also have an issue with the transboundary one covering transboundary water resources, because this is one area that cuts across the countries. We also had nature-based solutions as an area that was prioritized for a project. Then we also have issues of energy efficiency as well as renewable energy. And this, we engaged various partners, which include the NDC partnership. We had IFAD, we had UNDP, and we had the African Development Bank. Let me say that this was also a big opportunity to interact with the funding agencies such as the GCF, the JEF, and the Adaptation Fund, whose representatives were available to answer our questions and give very, very informative presentations to us. Now, in total, the ESC requires about $26 billion annually in order to implement the NDCs. And these are just, of course, very rough estimates. I know the figures are bound to be far higher than we had estimated. Next. So next steps is that after we have come up with the pipeline projects, we are now in the process of doing what is called resource mobilization, in the sense that the priority projects are now, we are developing them further with the accredited entities so that they become, they are, I don't know the best term to use, fit for purpose, they're implementable. Then after that, after we get the resources, we'll use, of course, to implement our East African strategy. Then after that, of course, after implementation, we go again, develop other projects, and then we have an investor forums, especially for areas that require non-state actors or the private sector who are able to invest in these projects, and then that cycle goes round and round. In the process, we have the needs of the ESC member states being met, and hopefully the ESC member states being more resilient to the adverse impacts of climate change. Next. Oh, sure. That is the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we'll have questions later. So thank you so much for the good presentation. Let's now move to Mr. Tiban from Maldives. As I said, is the Assistant Director Climate Change in the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Technology. Please.
Thank you. So good afternoon. My name is Tibian. I work in the Maldives in the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Technology. And I'm just going to give a bit of an overview about an island perspective, focusing mainly on the island states in the Indian Ocean. So as you all know, Maldives is a small island developing state. We are part of the ACE region. So there are 3 SIDS regions of the Caribbean, the Pacific, and the ACE, which stands for Atlantic, Indian Ocean, and South China Sea. For us, for the Maldives, we've struggled quite a bit in getting accredited to international funds, and that's been an ongoing issue even now. Currently, we don't have any national accreditation pathways, and because of the diversity of the ACE region, there's no single ACE region accredited entity. There are many sub-regions within the ACE that are trying to work on different movements, and that's sort of what the ISIO, or Island States in the Indian Ocean, is trying to achieve as well. This region is made up of 6 countries, so that's Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, and Comoros as small island developing states, but we've also included Madagascar and Sri Lanka as well. The reason for that being, for Maldives, we are a South Asian country, the only small island developing state in South Asia, but we also know that some of the needs of Madagascar and Sri Lanka vary on parallel to the needs that other SIDS face as well. So we've had some work has been done so far, not as far ahead as I think the East African region is, but we've had a technical workshop that was undertaken right before the pandemic started in March 2020. And we prepared the ISIO Climate Finance Mobilization and Access Strategy for the island states in the Indian Ocean. And we then had a technical workshop on climate finance mobilization and access last year. When you look at the current finance flows to the ISIO region, in the past almost 30 years, there's been kind of like $6.1 billion US of finance mobilized, and this was mainly in loans. And looking at the countries, most of this finance was mobilized to Sri Lanka, followed by Madagascar, Mauritius, Maldives, Comoros, and Seychelles in that order. So when you look at the ISIO region, what we're trying to achieve through this partnership, we definitely want to see increased adaptation, action, and capacity, and also mitigation, action, and capacity as well as strengthening the institutional and technical capacities to access climate finance for countries in this region, and also to ensure that we have effective implementation pathways as well. Also, we're trying to empower ISIOs to position our needs at the forefront of climate finance mobilization and access. Looking into the priority needs, when you look at mitigation, the countries in our region identified energy, transport, waste, forestry, land use, and agriculture as main sectors that they want to see mitigation needs addressed. And when you look at adaptation, the priority areas were water supply and sanitation, health, food security, critical infrastructure, biodiversity, and tourism. We also identified capacity needs that need to be addressed, including data monitoring and research, access to finance, private sector engagement, transparency, and good governance as well. We were able to quantify the needs. Currently, the available quantified needs for the ISIO region is $49.6 billion. And when you look into the breakdown, that is $10 billion for mitigation, $33 billion for adaptation, and $7 billion for technology and capacity building initiatives. Our strategy involves 6 areas of collaboration. Firstly, scaling up climate finance for adaptation. Secondly, partnerships and sources of finance. Third, capacity building and awareness raising. Fourth, enabling policies. Fifth, institutional arrangements. And 6th, the measurement, reporting, and verification, and looking into the transparency. As I mentioned, the ISIO region is not as ahead as we've heard from other panelists. So for our next steps and what we're trying to do in the future, we're trying to ensure we get political endorsement of the ISIO strategy and present this strategy to possible financiers and project developers through an investment forum that we aim to conduct next year. We're trying to develop regional collaboration projects to address common climate change challenges, which we hope will be undertaken throughout the course of this year. We are also going to undertake outreach to key public and private financing institutions to promote strategy. And in order to ensure that all of this happens, we are also in the very early stages of finalizing a partnership agreement between all 6 ISIO countries to ensure that we can formalize this collaboration going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Brian. Next is Rao Kaume from ECOWAS. You have the floor, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone. I will give you a brief on what has been done in ECOWAS region, in West African region. The West African region, the ECOWAS, covers 15 countries, and the region is vulnerable to climate change. And for this process of need-based finance project, we collaborated with the UNFCCC Secretariat and the West African Alliance for Carbon Market and Climate Finance. The process covers different steps, including the technical assessment and some regional consultations. So the consultations with all the countries, all the regional stakeholders to assess the needs of the region. And the main documentation we use are the NDCs, the NAPs, and the TNAs, the technology needs assessment. All these documents have been developed under the UNFCCC processes. And as the priority areas, we had some mitigation finance needs for NDC implementation, around 77 billion USD. And for adaptation, we are around 50 billion USD. So the strategy went through all the processes and then was adopted in 2022 alongside with a regional climate strategy. So at the time we were developing the need-based assessment strategy, we developed also a full regional climate change strategy. So the need-based strategy stands like as a tool for the implementation of the climate change strategy. So both documents were adopted by the Council of Ministers in July 2022. And the strategy covers the period of 2022-2032, around 294 billion dollars are needed for the implementation of NDCs of ECOWAS member states. So the strategy identifies also some strategies areas, and for all these strategy areas, we are also there is need for us to mobilize resources to be able to implement the strategy. We have also a pipeline of projects. So the projects are being developed and identified in consultation with the member states and the regional institutions. As part of the strategy for our plan for the implementation of the strategy, we have some regional institutional arrangements, and we have planned a regional workshop in facilitation in support with the support from the UNFCCC Secretariat. And on 2nd June 2023, we organized a technical and financial partners meeting where we presented the regional climate change strategy and also the need-based finance strategy to all the partners and to get their support. And we identify some the priority actions to be implemented. So all these actions were submitted to the partners, and we are still discussing to have the support for the implementation. So the training, we have also a training coming on for all the GCF, GEF, and adaptation fund focal points coming on August for us to discuss on the way forward for the implementation of strategy, and that will build also the capacity. And from this training, we will be coming out with some 5 key project ideas, and with the support from the UNFCCC Secretariat, we are intending to take up all these the 5 project ideas and have them submitted to the GCF, to the appropriate fund, depending on what will be discussed on August. So we are also establishing some collaboration in the region with some partners for the establishment of a regional carbon market for the ECOWAS zone. So all this action will also contribute to the facilitation, mobilization of all the resources for the implementation of the key actions defined in the climate change strategy and the need-based finance strategy. So it's what I can say on the ECOWAS region. Thank you, Richard.
Very much. Thank you very much for that presentation. Now we have our last speaker next to me, Zaim Habib. Let's also him give us his experience from the region. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's lovely to see so many people here. I wish I could see clearer, but it's very bright. No, but I think we're all here for a common interest in understanding how to access needs-based finance. And we've heard from a few of my esteemed panel members, so I'll try not to replicate a lot of what they say and touch upon elements of collaboration and commonality within the region. By quick introduction, my name is Zaim. I'm the head of the Brunei Climate Change Secretariat. I'm a secondee to this policy space because I come from the private sector. So I like to believe there's a business mindset to be applied here, especially when it comes to finance. A lot of what we do tends to be framing what the opportunity is, where we are currently, where we'd like to be, and how to get there, which really is the essence and the gist of this NBF approach as well. I think Daniele had mentioned earlier the intent of this NBF essentially is to help us mobilize and access climate finance. That is really important, especially for multi-stakeholder environments. Today I'll represent ASEAN perspective, which is part of Asia. And in ASEAN, it's a 10-member bloc with Timor-Leste as an additional observer party. The GDP is around $3.7 trillion. More than half live in urban areas. And there's around 600 million people within the region. Studies have shown that if we don't take any action on climate change, we stand to lose 30% of our GDP by 2050, which is a scary thought. Commonly within the area, because most parties are also surrounded by coastal places, Brunei included, of course we are also not immune to the effects of climate change. Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. So we are focusing on mitigation, adaptation, and to enable the actions here, they all come from the sources of climate finance. So the beauty of this NBF project and strategy as a whole, not only does it help us pool all the resources and knowledge together, but also it helps us to lessons learned, sharing of knowledge, and also best practices. Hearing from my panel here today, I echo what Tibian had mentioned. We're not as advanced as the Arab region or the African countries, but I think that's a good thing because we get to steal shamelessly from what they've done and also try to improve on what they know. So I think Tibian and I will probably do a tag team to ask the rest of our panel members after this. But of course, for the climate finance strategy, as I mentioned, it's understanding what's our baseline and our platform and how to go to where we want to be. It has to be aligned to certain parameters and certain deliverables. So our NDC targets for ASEAN, but also our national adaptation plans, because as mentioned, this is a vulnerable region, very much not immune to volcanic eruptions, typhoons, sea level rise, flooding, etc. So there are parallels for a lot of the parties, but also some bespoke circumstances that we all have to be conscious of. Hence, the collaborative nature of this project is important, not just with the UNFCCC, within ASEAN, but also with dialogue partners. So just a few weeks ago, I was at the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change meeting, and it was a very good collaborative atmosphere where we had dialogue partners from Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Japan, to name a few, but also from other not necessarily climate-related agencies, but those that are contributing towards it as well. So national disaster management, biodiversity. And this further enhances the topics of discussion. So the growing importance of global partnerships here, I cannot underestimate, and I'll further underscore that having banks involved, financial institutions, we also heard public-private partnerships is really key because I know the topic of finance has been a hot topic, if not here, but the whole of the subsidiary body meetings for the past 2 weeks. It's important that we bring it to the table because access is one thing, but mobilizing it is another. Daniele mentioned the bottoms-up approach. That's also true, especially for ASEAN, and I won't bore you with the details. The good thing about this 10-member bloc is there are advantages that we share, right, in terms of manageable gap to achieving our overall carbon neutrality, high nature-based potential, but also the complementarity of the region. So as we work together, these were the few things that we've actually delivered To the left, you'll see the technical assessment on climate finance flows and needs in the region, and also a climate finance guidebook. So we're currently at this phase where we're also developing the climate finance access and mobilization strategy. And further on from that, as you've heard from my fellow panel members, developing the regional pipeline of projects. On the next slide, I'm just going to show a bit of the history of how this has come about. So like most parties, the inception workshop happened pre-COVID, and I think we knew what happened 2 years after that. But we still maintained the dialogues and did the technical workshops and developed or initiated the development strategy. In those 2 years, we then also published 2 publications, and we were recently involved in a validation workshop with the members of the region. On the next slide, these are 2 publications if you're interested to read up more on. It's actually available on the UNFCCC webpage. So the Technical Assessment, Climate Finance, Flows and Needs in Southeast Asia, as well as the Climate Finance Guidebook for ASEAN and the region. Again, taking into account different national circumstances, different initial starting points, and also different sources of competitive advantage, but really identifying the commonality for everyone. Next slide just shows the workshop that we had in Manila recently. So this was in March. Before the physical workshops, a lot of it were done virtually, but the good thing about a physical workshop is it's email over email, so there's more of a relationship building there, and I can't overemphasize the importance of having that access to people, knowing what they can also offer. And these workshops, they support not just Brunei, but the region and beyond, supports in developing our skills, and also knowledge for preparing adaptation and mitigation projects, and of course, the climate finance access. The workshop, as I mentioned, was very interactive in nature, perhaps because it's probably one of the first few times folks were able to travel after COVID, so there's a lot of excitement, a lot of energy. But this is where we were also able to understand the perspective that didn't necessarily come through when it was a virtual platform. The offline coffee chats always help. This was also done in collaboration with other financial institutions, GCF, GEF, the Adaptation Fund, and also the Asian Development Bank. And at that time, what was identified from the workshop were 5 themes as part of the regional project concepts. So the ecosystem, nature-based solutions, security of energy, water and food, and also climate-resilient infrastructure. So really the theme of mitigation and adaptation coming through in each of them. On the next slide, this is just the outline of the strategic areas that will be within the strategy. So again, this is where I will probably defer to and lean on my fellow panelists here who are much further ahead, but really talking about supporting the development of the projects, how can we innovate and use climate technology. Again, having a multilateral approach, you can also bring costs down through scale. Access to climate finance, leveraging on the network effects of different dialogue partners and the different partners that the members of ASEAN also hold. But of course, capacity building and transparency in our reporting. So where we are currently, on the final slide, we've consolidated the inputs from all the ASEAN member states. We've gone through the ASEAN Secretariat. So we are at the phase of completing that comments review from ASEAN member states. I just found out recently from Sarah that the strategy is to be endorsed at the ministerial level, so it's good for me to know that as well. So we will likely do the same for ASEAN. I probably was just ignorant in that space, but we'll do the same. And the governance structure is we have the working group, the senior officials, and then the ministerial level. So we'll have a ministerial meeting this year in August. So hopefully it's at that point where we can concretize the strategy. Just as a finishing point, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been involved, all the stakeholders, all the participants, UNFCCC, of course. We're keen to learn and also share our knowledge, but this can be a template, and we can also steal the templates from the African countries, Arab countries, on how best we can also foster this and move it forward. It's important that this all turns to action, because if not, strategy and words on paper is just an idea. So we look forward to implementing it as well. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Zain. Thank you indeed, everyone here. I think this has been useful. We have gone through a round of presentations from our colleagues. I will not summarize everything, but I will just try to pick what you said. I understand, Sarah. At least I understand how vulnerable you are in terms of drought. If you receive only 85 cubic meters. I think this is way low in terms of reliability. Eastern Africa, I was part of it. Fortunately, I've been part of the East Africa, so I know all the documents. But one thing which you have admitted, we have really underestimated the needs of the sub-region. And I think it's important to learn from others that there is a lot to be done in terms of identifying the needs. I do understand from the Maldives that, of course, as island states, they are quite much more vulnerable in terms of what is happening there. 49.6 billion, that's what you need. This is a lot, and maybe you deserve this even more in terms of adaptation needs. In the West Africa, I think you have brought in something very interesting, the establishment of the Carbon Market Center, whereby now you are trying to see how you can at least mobilize more resources from that side. And of course, we have just heard from Zahim, very elaborate presentation, and frankly speaking, coming from the private sector, we have learned also a lot more in terms of how the private sector is getting engaged and how the private sector also can help us in all that. So we have, I think, 10, 15 minutes or even 20 for questions, elaborations, and all that. So let me now open the floor for very short, quick, precise questions. And you start with your name so we can record that, and then you give your questions to any of the panelists.
Hey, my name is Taig. I have a very quick question, and it's about blended finance. What approaches have you seen that have worked in other countries and in your regional countries as well? And what do you think needs to be changed for it to be more successful in the future, especially for banks and private sector institutions to get more involved?
Okay, maybe we take 3 questions. Huh? Yes.
My name is Preeti. I'm with the World Resources Institute. First, I'd like to congratulate all of you. This NEEDS project has come a long way, and I think, Richard, you've been involved right from the beginning. So from that pilot to where we are now, it is really a good development, and I do see the need for such initiatives. My question, and I think, Zaim, you are probably the only one who referred to the link with NDCs and NAPs. So the question is, how does all this work get embedded in the second round of NDCs? And, what is the plan? How will you capture the evolving needs as well? So linking it to the process, linking it to all the other discussions that are taking place, but recognizing much of the action that is taking on the ground in the countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. Next. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Max. First of all, thank you to all the panel. It's really great to see that such capable and driven people are working hard on this topic. All of you have mentioned certain target amounts for funding into the billions of US dollars. But how can you best ensure that climate finance reaches its intended target and achieves its intended goal? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get one more maybe, because they're too easy to answer, I think. Let's get one more. Yes.
Hi, my name is Wahid. I'm from Transparency International. I guess my question is will also be around corruption, something that was mentioned. So for all the money that's needed, how to ensure that reach to the affected communities, but also how this money will be kind of delivered, because corruption is not only on the receiving part, but also that thing. In the discussion that I was participated earlier, there was a mention of this being a grant, not a project type of thing. But from the projects, we see that they're not reaching the intended population. So how you guys suggest that this money should be received and how that will be spent? Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other hand, so yes.
Sure. How should we consider gender?
Your name, please?
My name is Harriet. How should we consider gender in the makeup of financial systems as we look at climate finance needs? And I'd be really grateful if the person who did not address this was the one woman on this 6-member panel.
I saw a hand just behind there.
Thank you. This is Tomeko. My name is Karen Bironji from Uganda. What is your experience with working with the private sector? I loved what Zaim talked about. When it comes to the cost of financing, I remember one of the people in the audience asked about blended finance. What's your experience with the cost of this financing instrument? Thank you.
Thank you. So as you think about the other questions, can we respond now? Maybe you had the questions. So where do we start, Sarah? Yes.
Thank you so much, and thanks a lot for your questions. I will try my best to answer the questions that related to my presentation. Mr. Tariq, regarding green financing, I will, and blended financing, and how to ensure banks and private sectors to be really engaged. It's the same to ensure, somehow from different perspective, how to ensure the community and they are well representative. It's the process that working with private sectors, and we have several private sector sectoral meetings to listen from their side, what's their obstacles, what's their challenges, and what their interest from the government side, and what they need from us to track their attention to the climate change issues and how they are, how it's their benefit, because finally they need benefits, and we tried our best to learn from their experience regarding financing for projects and how we link this with our priorities, and to make them feel that they are the owners for the projects, to work with the government on solving their challenges regarding and the obstacles through the process of investment and the real implementation as a private sector. So seeing that the government is willing to cooperate and to work with the private sector and leaving the ownership for their side, as they are the owner for the project. For Jordan, we have the first accredited entity under the UNFCCC regarding carbon markets. And after having these entities, there is a number of entities that reached the Ministry of Environment, and they asked us that how we could be accredited, what's the benefits, what we should have. From this, we understand that there is an interest regarding private sector engagement in carbon markets. For us, we need to make the image clearer and to track their interest in the process, and as I mentioned, somehow give them the ownership of the project, because private sector, one of the most challenges that they've answered about when we ask about challenges is that when working with government, we don't feel that we are the owner. We feel that the government are the owner of the project. So this is somehow part of the process for increasing the bank and private sector engagement. And for you about linkages with NDCs and NAB, I think most of us realize a lot, the need-based finance relies a lot on the NDCs. For the Arab states, for the technical assessment, which is the first step, the national report are the base for to study the financial flows and to express our needs regarding climate finance. And for the stage for developing the strategy, it started 2021, where part of our country region are submitting a new or updating NDCs, and they are one of of the most important source of information regarding climate finance needs, priorities, and list of financial window source regarding the indices that been submitted by the countries. So this is the most important document that we rely a lot through the process of building the strategy for the Arab region. For ensuring, for the gender, please let me answer this. The process is cycled, and as the strategy will open the door for financing, and the strategy relies a lot on the indices, and for countries as Arab region, the gender was specified as one of the most important elements to increase our resilience, because they are a vulnerable group, and we worked a lot on highlighting their role toward increasing our resilience. But the idea is that, let me tell you, and honestly speaking, before 3 years maybe, the issue of gender, especially on the political level, it's not that much take the interest that we need to, and linking the importance of level of engagement for the gender and their role, and if we neglect their presence and their role toward climate finance, the project from the beginning will be failed. And one of the most important elements in designing the concept note and the proposal writing for us in the region and for my country, Jordan, is to link the gender perspective and gender role in implementing the project, so we could ensure from the first beginning that they play the most significant role, because we know that and we appreciate the role of gender. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Michael, anything quickly? We have maybe each 3 minutes, so before we close. Michael, yes?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for the questions. First and foremost, let me respond to the issue of experience of working with the private sector. One thing I have learned over the years is that the private sector responds so well when something makes business sense. When it doesn't make business sense, they will not be able to risk wasting their time and efforts in any initiative. So as such, we have in the project pipelines various value chains. And I know, for instance, just as an example, in the agriculture value chains, there are so many areas where the private sector could easily participate. For instance, in areas like insurance, provision of index-based insurance, provision of inputs, and so on. So the private sector can easily play an integral role in these processes, so long as they make business sense. Otherwise, most of the other aspects of projects that don't make business sense normally is left for the public sector to handle. Then I wanted just to also comment on the issue of gender. Yes, gender is something very, very integral and very important, especially for us in the Eastern Africa region. And incidentally, it is more of the how. I've seen very many documents, very beautiful documents with a lot of gender or women mentioned in them, but when you go to the actual implementation phase, there's nothing really happening. So it is more of building the capacity of especially project implementers on the ground to be able to articulate issues of gender and make the project gender responsive, because just documentation or writing gender in a document may not really engender that document. Finally, the issue of targeting, how we ensure that the financing actually reaches the people that they are intended for, I feel it is so much to do with the targeting. When you are doing, when you are preparing your project indicators and so on, it is very important that you have very clear indicators that will address the actual vulnerabilities on the ground, and that is about targeting what you really want to achieve with your project. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Tidiane and Ro and Zaim, two things. One, of course, there is issue of accessibility, delivery, and of course, the gender has been touched upon. If you can touch on those, the issue of accessibility and delivery, they were raised here. And then, of course, Zaim, because of your experience in private sector, you can also touch on the NDCs, private sector, and all that. Quickly, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your questions. I think with regards to access, and especially on ensuring that climate finance reaches its targeting goals, for a lot of projects that we receive climate finance for, it's obvious that it's mainly mitigation projects, but that being said, very, very small scale mitigation projects, because you're not talking about really large gigawatts, it's megawatt level energy projects that we have. So when it comes to adaptation, it's not often that you can see physical changes or benefits that we receive. National priorities often aren't taken into account when it comes to adaptation, and in the Maldives' case, and as similar case for many small island states, we have to use domestic funding, often our budgetary allocations for seawalls and infrastructure like that. And if we have more climate finance that targets national priorities and projects that adaptation projects on the ground, I think that's one way. Obviously, taking into account having transparency and having good governance values, and if the fiduciary standards are met, I think aligning with national priorities is the best way to ensure that you can have projects that reach the target populations that you want. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I want to just mention two things. As he has already mentioned, for us, the project we have identified, so the projects are supposed to be implemented directly on ground. And regarding the private sector, for ECOWAS region, what we did is that the ECOWAS Commission itself hosts the Secretariat of the West African Federation of Chambers and Commerce for all the region. So for us to embark them in all the processes, for example, for the development of the climate change strategy, they were all embarked in the process, and they all know where we are going, what are the key actions we are putting in place in regard to the climate change related issues. On the gender, also, ECOWAS put in place a specific center on ECOWAS Gender Development Center based in Dakar. So all the climate change strategy, we have some sectoral point for which all the action defined are to be implemented by this Gender Development Center for us to be able to embark all the issue related gender on the implementation of climate change related actions.
Thank you. Thank you. So, okay, saying last.
Okay, I'll try to package the answers for all those questions, and I won't try to repeat a lot of what was answered earlier. So I think from a private sector angle, to really achieve a common goal is to make sure there's a value-based approach. I think they mentioned earlier, private sector, they don't see themselves in the picture if there's nothing in it for them. So if you're able to articulate a win-win for all, that's one good way. Sarah touched upon something very key, which is stakeholder engagement. A lot of the times, private sector are seen to be on the outside, and they're just being told what to do by policymakers. But if they're involved in the process, they're involved in developing the solutions, they're more keen to be part of it, and it's easier to use their words in the narrative as well, so they see themselves within. At the moment, I don't think that's necessarily the case. The beauty of having the private sector involved is that their processes tend to be a lot quicker and a lot more streamlined and effective compared to the government space. So I think that's the part where you can also leverage for them to speed it up. At the moment, in terms of funding, when we talk about budget finance, even for us, it comes from our yearly budget from the government, or sometimes national development funds. However, we have signed memorandums of understanding. So recently, we signed one with our local bank to the tune of $2 billion for climate financing. Within the region, they've done the same as well. But again, it's the understanding of what that's for. A lot of project proponents think, oh, great, that's a budget. It's actually a financing opportunity. So I think this is the part where there needs to be a lot more clarity. There was a question around access and making sure it really gets to the right people. Taking a private sector approach with projects, it's really managing three things. Resources, right? So people, cost, and schedule. So doing so and making sure the reporting and tracking is very clear. The integrity is also there. And also then making sure it's audited, right? Is the money being spent in the right place? Are you actually achieving your milestones? Are the hours accounted for? Again, not a perfect process, but one where we see opportunities to replicate from. The question around coastal financing as well, financing for coastal projects, we do see that as well because we're surrounded by the coast, so coastal erosion happens, sea level rise, so building seawalls are there. I think the opportunity, and I'll tie this into the NDC NAP question and my response on having it value-based, the narrative has also shifted when it comes to climate change, right? It's not just so much about saving the world, because that's a non-negotiable, but it's also about identifying the opportunities within. So perhaps within the value chain, if you identify opportunities for green growth, green jobs, there's more possibility of that going in there. At the moment, financing still comes from the government pockets, but this is where we see them playing more of a role in there. Of course, it's not easy for adaptation, Tibian mentioned. Mitigation, there's a clear gain. But adaptation, it's a bit of a slow burner. But that's where if you can identify revenue from nature-based solutions, for example, and again, my private sector hat on, when you do projects, you have to run the economics to show that there's value coming in out of it. Gender, just very quickly, it needs to be a whole-of-nation approach and not just whole of government or one. So it's very important when you shape the policies, shape the solutions to have everyone on board.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues. I think they have a round of applause. Yeah? It has been a great team. Yes, it has been a great team. I don't want to summarize. We don't have much time, but I think everybody has summarized what was spoken earlier. The questions were raised were answered. I thank you sincerely for your open participation, your perspectives, your experiences, and this is part of capacity building, sharing what we now know through this project. So again, the audience, thank you very much for attending. We have no more time, and I think we have to close from here. Thank you so much. Thank you.